Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be here because we are really unpacking one of these research papers again today, and it's a favorite one of ours, and it's called Building Thinking Classrooms. So this is sort of a new thing that is like just making its way all across North America, at least, right, Mark?
Totally. I was just talking to my friend, and they were talking about how it's been a board objective to work with Peter Liljedhal's Building Thinking Classrooms.
And this one in particular, Mark, I think is a beautiful paper that really gives insight into how teachers can read this paper, take these four nuggets to decide for themselves if their teaching is based on current research.
Right. So we can do a little self-diagnosing.
Yeah, well, and Mark, we talked about how all this research is sort of locked up, right? So if that's you that is identifying yourself in some of these little nuggets, because we're going to tell you what it doesn't look like when you're following research. So if you're finding your classroom practice in this, just take it easy on yourself, be very kind to yourself, because again, all of these little things are like locked in this research. So just be very kind and soft with yourself. It's a really nice story. It's beautifully written, but it's not very researchy. But even given that, for those people that this is their first time, this is a really, really nice paper and has tons of little nuggets in it, right?
And so we're going to only talk about 4 nuggets.
Yeah, that's all we ever talk about is we try to talk about four nuggets so that people know four things. Okay, so let's just get started then. I'll
Number
pull up
one.
the I'll pull up the paper so people can see where this is. So this is right here, and they talk about a teacher whose classroom and a very good teacher that, the author speaks very nicely about this teacher, but is just, all of these research theories are not apparent in her classroom.
Yeah.
So, Mark, what's the first thing that we can sort of think about if we're thinking about our own teaching practice?
Sure. So the first question we can ask ourselves is, how are tasks being used and given in my classroom?
Oh, yeah. So, this is if you're thinking about your classroom and what happened yesterday, if you're thinking about how maybe you like sat at the front of the room and you gave a whole bunch of worked examples. So, if you're doing the tasks as worked examples in front of the room, then you're probably not following research if you have a large portion of your time was doing that. So that's the first indication.
Okay. Number two, how are groups formed in your classroom?
So this was again, so if you've given out a homework assignment and the groups in your classroom
Mhm.
they can just either self-select or they can just not work in groups, then chances are you're not following a classroom that's based on research, because what we found is that grouping is really, really important. So what people should be doing is visible random grouping and frequent visible random grouping. And what that means is that you're grouping kids based on randomness and they're forming groups. You're not picking like, the smartest kid to help out some other kids. You're just visibly randomly, they can see that it's random. You
Yeah.
can see it's random, they can see it's random.
Random. Yep.
All
Number
right.
three is, how is the classroom being set up?
Oh, yeah. So this is a big one. So if your classroom is just like rows of desks,
Hmm.
and kids are just quietly sitting in those desks and they're working on problems themselves, then probably you're not following a research guided classroom. Like your teaching isn't based on current research, because what it should look like is it should look like that they're actually working on non-permanent vertical space, so that you should have and sometimes it's hard to get, but lots of whiteboards or chalkboards, non-permanent workspace up around the room, and they should be up on those boards working on them.
Okay. And the last thing we're going to talk about, even though there's more in here, is that the teacher's position. I'm going to put it in a question. What is my position in the classroom?
Oh yeah. So what Mark's actually saying is if you think about, your classroom that happened yesterday or Friday, where were you for most of that class? If you were at the front of the room, where your desk is, or right at the front of the room, like, and all students can sort of tell where the front of the room is, or anyone walking in from outside can tell where the front of the room is, the front wall, then you're probably not following current research in your classroom, because that
Mhm.
means that when anyone comes into your room, you should be sort of all over the place, right? Just talking to groups over here, talking to groups over there, talking to the class and addressing them from the back. But really, you can't really identify the back. So that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So, Mark, these are just really good indicators that we can use for ourselves to see how, where we are on that range of following, research and really using research in our classrooms. And if we're not, if we saw ourselves in a lot of these, again, just be very kind to yourselves and very, again, all this stuff is locked up in papers. So we don't want to be really hard on ourselves and blame ourselves for this.
Yeah.
But now that read this paper, watch our YouTube channel, follow, hit that bell icon, because every week we're gonna be looking at these papers and telling you things that you can do in your classrooms and these little nuggets that everyone can use.
Awesome.